The Galactic Military Academy sprawled across 3 moons of Kepler, 442b, its crystalline structures gleaming under the pale light of twin suns. For over 2 centuries, it had trained the finest officers from across the known galaxy, molding beings from dozens of species into the elite forces that protected civilized space. The Academy's reputation was built on discipline, excellence, and an unbreakable chain of command that had never been successfully challenged. Until today, Cadet Marcus Chun moved through the morning formations with practiced ease, his human physique standing out among the diverse collection of alien species that made up Class 2387. At 19 standard years, he was younger than most of his peers, but his test scores and physical assessments had earned him a place among the Academy's most promising candidates. The instructors had initially been skeptical of accepting another human. The third species had only recently joined the Galactic Federation, and their military traditions were considered primitive by galactic standards. The drill courtyard buzzed with nervous energy as cadets from 12 different worlds prepared for their weekly combat assessment. Today's exercise would test their ability to work as integrated units, combining the unique strengths of each species into cohesive fighting forces. Marcus found himself assigned to Squad 7, a mixed unit that included 2 Vorthack warriors, a Zalani technician, a Meridian scout, and a young Kretal named Zix who barely reached Marcus's shoulder. Commander Thalex strode onto the assessment field, his massive frame casting long shadows across the assembled cadets. The Gordanian officer stood nearly 3 meters tall, his thick hide scarred from countless battles across the Outer Rim territories. His 4 arms moved with practiced precision as he activated the holographic display that would outline the day's challenges. Among the cadets, whispers quickly died as his cold, amber eyes swept across the formation. Today you will demonstrate your worthiness to wear the uniform of the Galactic Defense Force, Thalex announced, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard. Failure is not merely disappointing, it is dangerous. In real combat, your weakness kills not only yourself, but your squad mates. The first wave of the assessment went smoothly enough. Squad 7 worked through the simulated scenarios with growing confidence, each member contributing their species' natural advantages to overcome the challenges. Marcus found himself naturally falling into a leadership role, coordinating the team's movements and adapting their tactics as new obstacles appeared. The Vorthack provided heavy firepower, the Zalani handled technical systems, the Meridians scouted ahead, and little Zix proved surprisingly effective at infiltration tasks. It was during the 4th scenario that things went wrong. The simulation placed them in a hostage rescue situation aboard a disabled transport vessel. The team moved through the narrow corridors with careful precision, Marcus coordinating their approach, while Zix slipped ahead to gather intelligence. The young Kretal had located the hostages and was preparing to signal the all-clear when the simulation's parameters suddenly shifted. A new threat appeared. Armed pirates had boarded the vessel from another direction. Zix found himself caught between the hostages and the approaching enemies, forced to make a split-second decision. The young cadet chose to break cover and warn his teammates, potentially saving the simulated hostages, but exposing himself to enemy fire. The simulation ended with their objective achieved, but Zix had taken several hits that would have been fatal in real combat. As the holographic environment faded, leaving them standing in the stark metal chamber, Commander Thalex approached with measured steps. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his massive frame suggested displeasure. "Explain your actions, Cadet Zix," Thalex commanded, looming over the small alien. Zix straightened as much as his diminutive frame allowed, meeting the commander's gaze despite the obvious fear in his large, dark eyes. "Sir, the hostages were in immediate danger. My position allowed me to provide early warning to my squad, increasing our chances of mission success. Your position was compromised due to poor tactical awareness," Thalex replied coldly. "A dead soldier provides no warnings. Your reckless behavior could have resulted in total mission failure." Marcus stepped forward, unable to remain silent. "Sir, with respect, Cadet Zix's actions saved the mission. His sacrifice allowed us to—" "Did I address you, human?" Thalex's voice carried a dangerous edge as he turned his attention to Marcus. Your species has been part of the Federation for barely 5 years. Do not presume to understand tactics that have kept the peace for centuries. The other cadets shifted uncomfortably, sensing the escalating tension. Marcus felt his jaw clench, but forced himself to maintain military bearing. No, sir, but I believe, you believe? Thalex's laugh was harsh and humorless. Humans always believe they know better. Your people's violent history speaks for itself. Random aggression and emotional responses, exactly what we witnessed here. The commander turned back to Zix, who was trembling slightly under the intense scrutiny. Your tactical instructor will review proper positioning protocols with you. Perhaps additional combat simulations will help you understand the importance of self-preservation over heroics. What happened next occurred so quickly that most witnesses would later struggle to describe the exact sequence of events. Commander Thalex, apparently deciding that verbal correction was insufficient, drew back one of his massive arms and struck Zix across the face. The blow was calculated, hard enough to send the small cadet sprawling across the metal floor, but not quite hard enough to cause permanent injury. It was the kind of corrective action that the Gordanian military considered standard procedure. Physical discipline was an accepted part of their training methodology, designed to create soldiers who could endure any hardship. What Thalex failed to consider was that humans had very different ideas about what constituted acceptable treatment of subordinates. The sound of the impact echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Zix lay motionless for a moment, a dark bruise already forming across his delicate features. The other cadets froze, uncertain how to respond to this sudden escalation. Squad 7's members looked to Marcus, recognizing his leadership role even in this crisis. Marcus felt something cold and dangerous settle in his chest as he watched Zix struggle to push himself upright. The young alien's arm shook as he tried to support his weight, and Marcus could see blood trickling from his nostril equivalents. The rational part of his mind understood that this was military discipline, that challenging a superior officer would end his career before it truly began. But the larger part of his mind, the part shaped by human history and human values, saw only an adult brutally striking a teenager who had been trying to do the right thing. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "That was unnecessary." Commander Thalex turned slowly, his amber eyes narrowing as he studied the human cadet. "Are you questioning my methods, human? I'm stating that striking a cadet is inappropriate and counterproductive to military discipline," Marcus replied, his voice growing stronger. Cadet Zix showed courage and tactical thinking. Punishing him for those qualities serves no purpose except intimidation. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Even the soft humming of the ventilation systems seemed muted as everyone present realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. A first-year cadet was directly challenging a senior commander's authority, not just questioning orders, but condemning his actions. Thalex stepped closer to Marcus, using his considerable height advantage to loom over the human. "Your species' emotional weakness is showing, cadet. In real combat, hard decisions must be made. Soldiers must learn to follow orders without question, even when those orders result in casualties. Following orders doesn't require accepting abuse." Marcus shot back. "A leader who needs to strike subordinates to maintain authority isn't a leader. He's a bully." The words hung in the air like an ectoplasmic charge. Several cadets audibly gasped at the unprecedented breach of military protocol. Calling a superior officer a bully was more than insubordination. It was career suicide. Thalex's expression shifted from annoyance to genuine anger. His forearms flexed as he considered his response, and Marcus could see the calculation in his eyes. The commander was deciding how severe his retaliation should be. "You will learn respect, human," Thalex growled, raising his hand in preparation for the same kind of corrective blow he had administered to Zix. What followed would become legend throughout the Galactic Military Academy. As Thalex's massive fist descended toward his face, Marcus moved with reflexes honed by years of human martial arts training. He stepped inside the commander's reach, avoiding the telegraph blow, and delivered a precise uppercut to Thalex's exposed chin. The punch combined proper technique with human muscular density and the adrenaline surge that had made his species famous throughout their violent history. The impact was devastating. Commander Thale X, veteran of dozens of campaigns, and considered one of the Academy's most formidable instructors, dropped like a felled tree. His massive body hit the metal floor with a resounding crash that echoed throughout the chamber. He lay motionless, completely unconscious, his amber eyes rolled back, and his breathing shallow but steady. Marcus stood over the fallen commander, his fists still clenched, breathing hard as the adrenaline coursed through his system. Around him, the other cadets stared in absolute shock. None of them had ever seen a Gordanian warrior defeated in single combat, let alone by a first-year cadet from a species that most galactic citizens considered physically inferior. The silence stretched for long seconds before someone finally spoke. "Holy stars," whispered one of the Vorthak cadets. "The human just knocked out Commander Thale X." Marcus looked down at his commanding officer's unconscious form, and for the first time since throwing the punch, he realized the full magnitude of what he had done. He had just assaulted a superior officer in front of witnesses. His career at the Academy was over. Worse, he had likely created a diplomatic incident between humanity and the Gordanian Empire. But as he looked over at Zix, who was staring at him with wonder and gratitude, Marcus found that he didn't regret his actions. Some things were more important than following orders, and protecting those under his care was one of them. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor outside the chamber. Within moments, the Academy's security forces would arrive to investigate the commotion. Marcus would face military tribunal, possible imprisonment, and almost certain expulsion from the service he had dreamed of joining since childhood. Yet as he helped Zix to his feet, supporting the smaller aliens' weight as they waited for the inevitable consequences, Marcus couldn't bring himself to wish he had acted differently. His human instincts had taken over, and while that might doom his military career, it had also revealed something important about the values his species brought to the Galactic Federation. The chamber door burst open as Academy security personnel flooded in, their weapons drawn and their expressions grim. They stopped short when they saw Commander Thale X's unconscious form on the floor, then quickly surrounded Marcus with professional efficiency. "Cadet Chun," the lead security officer announced formally, "you are under arrest for assault on a superior officer. You will surrender your weapons and submit to restraint." Marcus nodded calmly, offering no resistance as they secured his hands behind his back. As they led him toward the door, he caught the eyes of his squad mates. What he saw there surprised him. Not condemnation or fear, but respect and something approaching awe. "Chun," called one of the Vorthak warriors. "That was the most honorable thing I've ever seen." Similar murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled cadets as Marcus was escorted from the chamber. Behind him, medical personnel rushed to attend to Commander Thale X, who was beginning to stir but remained clearly disoriented from the knockout blow. As they moved through the Academy's corridors, Marcus caught glimpses of other cadets and instructors watching through doorways and windows. Word was already spreading throughout the massive complex. A human cadet had knocked out one of their most feared commanders with a single punch. By evening, the story would reach every corner of the Academy. By tomorrow, it would spread throughout the Galactic Defense Force. What Marcus didn't yet realize was that his actions had started something far larger than a simple disciplinary incident. The punch that had dropped Commander Thale X had also shattered assumptions about human capabilities, human values, and humanity's place in the broader galactic community. The security escort brought him to the Academy's detention facility, where he would await formal charges and military tribunal. As the cell door closed behind him, Marcus reflected on the chain of events that had led him here. He had come to the Academy hoping to prove that humans could contribute to galactic security. Instead, he had potentially confirmed every negative stereotype about human aggression and emotional instability. But he had also demonstrated human courage, human loyalty, and the human willingness to stand up for what was right regardless of personal cost. Whether the Academy authorities would recognize those qualities remained to be seen. Outside his cell, Marcus could hear the sound of urgent communications and hurried footsteps as Academy officials tried to process what had occurred. The assault of a superior officer by a cadet was unprecedented in the institution's history, and no one was quite sure how to handle the situation. What they didn't know was that news of the incident was already reaching the highest levels of galactic government, where human representatives were preparing their own response to the crisis. The next few days would determine not only Marcus's fate, but the future of human participation in the Galactic Defense Force. The detention facility of the Galactic Military Academy had been designed to hold the most dangerous beings in known space, but it had never housed a prisoner quite like Marcus Chun. As he sat on the narrow metal bench that served as both seat and bed, the young human found himself at the center of a political storm that was rapidly spreading throughout the galaxy. Admiral Kextar paced the length of his office, his tentacled appendages writhing with agitation as he reviewed the incident reports flooding his communication terminal. The Meridian Administrator had overseen the Academy for 37 standard years without a single major incident. Now, in the span of a few hours, he faced the worst crisis in the institution's history. Explain to me again how a first-year cadet managed to render unconscious one of our most experienced combat instructors, Kextar demanded, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into Standard Galactic. Lieutenant Colonel Vexhai, the Academy's security chief, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The insectoid officer's compound eyes reflected his unease as he accessed the relevant files. Sir, the medical examination confirms that Commander Thalex suffered a severe concussion from a single blow to the mandible region. The force of impact was sufficient to cause immediate unconsciousness and temporary neural disruption. A single blow, Kextar repeated incredulously, from a human barely out of adolescence. Yes, sir. The combat analysis indicates that Cadet Chin utilized a technique from his species' martial arts traditions, combined with what our physiologists describe as optimal kinetic transfer. The humans possess greater muscle density than most Federation species, and their bone structure is apparently designed for high-impact applications. Kextar's tentacles curled tighter as he processed this information. The implications were staggering. If humans were capable of such devastating single-strike capabilities, what did that mean for galactic security? Were they training potential weapons of mass destruction? Or had they discovered a valuable ally? What is the current status of Commander Thalex? He regained consciousness approximately 2 hours ago, sir. Medical reports indicate no permanent damage, though he remains disoriented and is experiencing what humans term wounded pride. He is demanding immediate disciplinary action against the cadet. The Admiral's office door chimed softly, indicating an urgent communication. Kextar activated his display to find the stern features of General Morduin, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Force. The Gordanian general's expression was thunderous as he appeared in full holographic detail. Admiral, Morduin's voice rumbled with barely contained anger. I trust you have an explanation for why one of my officers was assaulted by a cadet under your supervision. Kextar straightened, recognizing the dangerous tone in his superior's voice. General, the incident is under full investigation. I can assure you that appropriate disciplinary measures will be taken. Disciplinary measures? Morduin's laugh was harsh. Admiral, this human has committed an act of war. Attacking a Gordanian officer is not merely insubordination. It is an insult to our entire species. We demand immediate and severe punishment. Before Kextar could respond, another communication channel activated. Ambassador Sarah Martinez of the Human Colonial Administration appeared on a secondary screen, her professional demeanor barely concealing her own tension. General Morduin, she interjected smoothly, I believe you're overlooking some critical details about this incident. My government has reviewed the preliminary reports, and we have some serious concerns about the circumstances that led to this confrontation. Morduin's massive head turned toward the human ambassador's image. Concerns? Your representative assaulted my officer. That is the only relevant fact in this situation. Our representative defended a fellow cadet from what can only be described as unprovoked violence. Martinez replied coolly. Striking a subordinate is considered assault under both human law and Galactic Federation regulations. If anyone should be facing charges, it's Commander Thalex. The tension in Admiral Kextar's office was palpable as the two species representatives faced off. Lieutenant Colonel Vexhai's antennae twitched nervously as he witnessed what appeared to be the beginning of a major diplomatic crisis. Meanwhile, in the Academy's medical facility, Zix underwent examination by the chief medical officer. Dr. Hella and I, a gentle Avalon with extensive experience treating combat injuries, carefully assessed the damage from Commander Thalex's blow. Her 6 delicate arms moved with precise efficiency as she conducted scans and recorded observations. The facial trauma is consistent with significant force application, she noted, speaking to her medical recorder. Soft tissue damage, minor hemorrhaging, and psychological stress indicators are all present. This level of injury from a disciplinary action is unusual. Zix remained quiet during the examination, but his large eyes held a mixture of gratitude and concern. When Dr. Hella and I completed her assessment, she sat beside the young Kretal with obvious empathy. "How do you feel about what happened today?" she asked gently. Confused, Zix admitted. "Commander Thalex was angry about my tactical decision. I understand that. But Marcus, Cadet Chun, he didn't have to defend me. He knew it would end his career, but he did it anyway." Dr. Helani knew det tukt för det. Human behavior patterns are still being studied by our sociologists. They appear to have unusually strong protective instincts, particularly toward those they perceive as vulnerable or under their care. Is that why the other species fear them? Fear is perhaps too strong a word, the doctor replied carefully. Concern might be more accurate. Humans have a violent history, but they also demonstrate remarkable loyalty and willingness to sacrifice for others. It's a combination that makes them unpredictable. Back in the detention facility, Marcus was receiving his own unexpected visitors. The cell door slid open to admit Captain Elena Vasquez, the Academy's only other human instructor. Her presence surprised Marcus, who had expected formal interrogation rather than what appeared to be a personal visit. "Cadet Chun," Captain Vasquez said formally, then added in a quieter tone, "You've certainly made an impression." "Ma'am," Marcus replied, standing at attention despite his confined status. "I assume you're here to discuss my court-martial proceedings." Vasquez studied him for a long moment before sitting on the bench across from him. "Actually, I'm here to understand what you were thinking. Striking a superior officer is career suicide. Marcus, you know that." "Yes, ma'am." "Ido. Then, why did you do it?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Because it was the right thing to do." Commander Thalex had no justification for striking Cadet Zix. The use of physical force against a subordinate for a tactical decision is not only inappropriate, it's counterproductive to military discipline. "You sound like you're reciting from a textbook on military leadership," Vasquez observed. "Maybe because I am," Marcus admitted. Human military doctrine emphasizes that leaders must earn respect through competence and integrity, not through intimidation. What Commander Thalex did was bullying, not leadership. Captain Vasquez leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "You realize that most galactic species have different concepts of discipline and authority. What seems like abuse to human sensibilities might be perfectly acceptable in Gordanian military culture. With respect, ma'am, I don't care. If we're going to integrate human forces into the Galactic Defense Force, we need to establish that some behaviors are unacceptable regardless of cultural context. Protecting subordinates from abuse should be universal." The captain's slight smile suggested approval, though her voice remained professional. "That's a very human perspective, Marcus. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy is ready to accept human perspectives." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another visitor. Admiral Kextar himself entered the detention area, flanked by security personnel and looking distinctly uncomfortable. The Meridian Administrator's tentacles moved in complex patterns that Marcus had learned indicated significant stress. "Cadet Chun," the Admiral began formally, "I am here to inform you that this incident has attracted attention at the highest levels of galactic government. Your actions have created a diplomatic crisis between the Human Colonial Administration and the Gordanian Empire." Marcus felt his heart sink. "Sir, I never intended to create political problems. I was simply responding to what I perceived as an injustice." "Your intentions are noted," Kextar replied. "However, intentions do not alter consequences. The Gordanian government is demanding your immediate expulsion and criminal prosecution. The Human Colonial Administration is threatening to withdraw from the military exchange program unless their concerns about Academy policies are addressed." Captain Vasquez stepped forward. "Admiral, what exactly are the Human Colonial Administration's concerns?" Kextar's tentacles writhed with obvious agitation. Ambassador Martinez has formally complained about what she terms institutionalized violence in our training programs. She claims that striking cadets is a violation of galactic regulations regarding the treatment of military personnel. Is she wrong? Marcus asked quietly. The Admiral's compound eyes focused on the young human with something approaching surprise. That is not for cadets to determine, Cadet Shun. With respect, sir, that's exactly what cadets should determine. We're the ones who will be serving under these officers. We're the ones who need to trust that our leaders will treat us with basic dignity and respect. Admiral Kextar studied Marcus for a long moment, his alien features unreadable. You are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, Cadet Shin. Probably both, sir. The Admiral's translator conveyed what might have been amusement. Indeed. Very well, Cadet Shun. You will remain in detention while we attempt to resolve this crisis. Your ultimate fate will depend on whether our diplomatic teams can find a solution that satisfies both the Gordanian Empire and the human colonial administration. As the Admiral departed, Captain Vasquez remained behind for a few more moments. Marcus, she said quietly, I want you to know that what you did today, it took courage. Regardless of how this turns out, you've demonstrated the kind of character that makes humans valuable allies. Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot. Don't thank me yet, she warned. This situation is far from over, and there are forces at work that extend well beyond a simple disciplinary incident. Your punch may have started something much larger than either of us anticipated. After she left, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts once again. Through the small window in his cell, he could see the Academy's training grounds where cadets from dozens of species continued their daily routines. Word of the incident had clearly spread. He could see groups of students engaged in animated discussions, and more than once he caught aliens staring in his direction. What he didn't know was that similar discussions were taking place throughout the galaxy. In the Human Colonial Administration's headquarters on New Geneva, emergency sessions were being convened to address the crisis. On the Gordanian homeworld of Korthal, military leaders debated whether humans represented a threat to established galactic order. Most significantly, on dozens of other worlds throughout the Federation, species that had their own complicated relationships with Gordanian military doctrine were watching the situation with great interest. The Academy's training methods have been questioned before, but never directly challenged. Marcus's single punch had opened a conversation that many had been afraid to start. In the Academy's communications center, subspace messages flowed between distant worlds at faster-than-light speeds. Diplomats, military commanders, and government officials were all weighing in on what many were calling the Chun incident. Some demanded harsh punishment, as an example, to prevent future challenges to military authority. Others argued that the incident exposed systemic problems in galactic military culture that needed to be addressed. As the galactic day cycle shifted toward evening, Marcus prepared for what would likely be a long and difficult process. His single moment of action had created consequences that would ripple throughout the Federation for months or even years to come. Whether those consequences would ultimately benefit or harm human integration into galactic society remained to be seen. But one thing was certain, the galaxy would never again underestimate what humans were capable of when they decided to take a stand for their principles. 3 days after the incident, the Galactic Military Academy had become the center of unprecedented political attention. Media crews from a dozen worlds had established camps outside the Academy's perimeter, their transmissions carrying news of the crisis to every corner of civilized space. What had begun as a simple disciplinary incident was rapidly evolving into a fundamental examination of military culture and species relations within the Federation. In the depths of the Academy's Strategic Planning Center, an emergency council convened to address the growing crisis. Representatives from the major galactic powers sat around a circular table designed to accommodate the diverse physiological needs of Federation species. The atmosphere was tense as each delegation prepared to present their position on what was being called the most significant military scandal in galactic history. General Mordun led the Gordanian delegation, his massive frame radiating anger that had barely subsided since receiving the initial reports. Beside him sat 2 other Gordanian officials, their scarred hides bearing testimony to decades of military service. Across the table, Ambassador Martinez represented human interests, flanked by Captain Vasquez and a legal advisor from the Colonial Administration's Military Affairs Division. Admiral Kextar occupied the position of mediator, though his obvious stress suggested he was struggling with the enormous pressure from all sides. Representatives from the Vorthak Confederacy, the Meridian Republic, the Zilani Technical Union, and half a dozen other major powers completed the assembly, each bringing their own perspectives on military discipline and interspecies relations. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, Admiral Kextar began formally. We are here to address a situation that threatens the stability of our educational institutions and potentially our alliance structures. The incident involving Cadet Chun and Commander Thalex has raised fundamental questions about our training methodologies and cultural integration protocols. General Morduin stood immediately, his forearms gesture emphatically. There are no questions to be raised, Admiral. A cadet assaulted a superior officer. The response should be immediate expulsion, criminal prosecution, and formal apology from the Human Colonial Administration for their representative's conduct. Ambassador Martinez rose smoothly to respond. General Morduin, your characterization of events conveniently omits the assault committed by Commander Thalex against Cadet Zix. Our preliminary investigation indicates that the commander's actions violated both Academy regulations and basic Federation standards regarding the treatment of military personnel. Disciplinary correction is not assault, Morduin replied harshly. Gordanian military doctrine has maintained order and effectiveness for over 3 centuries. Your species' emotional responses do not supersede established military tradition. Tradition does not justify abuse, Martinez shot back. If Gordanian military doctrine includes striking subordinates as standard procedure, then that doctrine needs to be reconsidered. The tension in the room escalated dramatically as other species representatives began choosing sides. The Vorthak delegate, Commander Krellnan, spoke with the measured tone of a veteran diplomat. The Vorthak Confederacy has observed this incident with great interest, Krellnan announced. While we respect Gordanian military achievements, we must note that their disciplinary methods have previously raised concerns among junior officers from our worlds. Perhaps this incident provides an opportunity to examine whether current practices serve the best interests of the integrated forces. General Morduin turned his angry gaze toward the Vorthak representative. Are you suggesting that centuries of Gordanian military excellence should be abandoned because of human sensitivities? I am suggesting that effective military discipline does not require physical intimidation, Krellnan replied calmly. The Vorthak military has achieved comparable results through methods that emphasize respect and professional development rather than fear. The Zilani delegate, Professor Ziltera, activated her translation device with a series of soft chimes. The technical union has reviewed the incident data and wishes to present some relevant findings. Our analysis indicates that Cadet Chin's response time and force application suggest significant combat potential. Rather than viewing this as a disciplinary problem, perhaps we should consider the strategic implications of human combat capabilities. This perspective introduced an entirely new dimension to the discussion. The assembled delegates have been focused on the political and cultural aspects of the incident, but Professor Ziltera's comment reminded everyone that humans remained relatively unknown quantities in terms of military capability. Admiral Kextar seized upon this opening. Professor Ziltera raises an important point. Our combat assessments of human personnel have been limited, but this incident suggests we may have underestimated their potential contributions to galactic defense. Potential contributions? General Morduin's voice carried dangerous undertones. Or potential threats. A species that responds to military discipline with violence could destabilize our entire command structure. Ambassador Martinez stood again, her expression hardening. General, I need to correct a fundamental mischaracterization. Cadet Chun did not respond to military discipline with violence. He responded to assault with self-defense and the protection of a vulnerable subordinate. If you cannot distinguish between those two concepts, then perhaps the problem lies with your understanding of leadership. The accusation hung in the air like an active weapon as General Morduin's face darkened with rage. For a moment, it appeared that the diplomatic meeting might dissolve into open hostility. However, an unexpected intervention came from an unlikely source. If I may, a new voice said quietly. Every head turned toward the speaker, Cadet Zix, who had been permitted to attend the session as a material witness. The young Kretal's presence had been largely ignored by the major power representatives, but his soft words somehow cut through the escalating tension. I was there, Zix continued, his voice growing stronger despite his obvious nervousness. I experienced both Commander Thalex's actions and Cadet Chin's response. I believe my perspective might be relevant to these discussions. Admiral Kextar gestured for him to continue. Please proceed, Cadet Zix. The young alien straightened as much as his small frame allowed. Commander Thalex struck me because he disapproved of my tactical decision during the simulation. I accept that my choice was questionable. Perhaps I should have prioritized my own safety over the mission objective. However, the physical blow was not instructional. It was not corrective. It was purely punitive, intended to cause pain and humiliation. General Morduan's expression grew even darker, but he remained silent as Zix continued. When Cadet Chin intervened, he was not challenging military authority. He was protecting someone who could not protect himself from what he perceived as injustice. In my species' culture, such protection is considered the highest form of honor. I believe many other species share similar values. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table from several delegates. Zix's simple, honest account was having an impact that hours of political rhetoric had failed to achieve. Furthermore, Zix added, Cadet Chin's combat skills were not used for aggression or intimidation. He employed exactly the minimum force necessary to stop Commander Thalex's attack. A being with malicious intent would have continued striking or used more devastating techniques. Instead, Cadet Chin immediately moved to assist me and offered no resistance to Academy security. Professor Zilterra's device chimed softly as she processed this information. The cadet's analysis aligns with our technical assessment. The human demonstrated precise control and tactical restraint, qualities that suggest excellent potential for military leadership rather than undisciplined violence. The Meridian delegate, Admiral Yintao, spoke for the first time during the session. The Republic has remained neutral in this discussion, but Cadet Zix's testimony suggests we may be addressing the wrong issues. Rather than debating punishment for the human, perhaps we should be examining whether our current training methods adequately prepare officers for integrated command structures. This observation created another shift in the room's dynamics. Several delegates who had been focusing on the punishment aspect began reconsidering the broader implications of the incident. Ambassador Martinez recognized the opportunity. The Human Colonial Administration proposes a comprehensive review of military training protocols, with particular attention to cross-species sensitivity and leadership development. We believe this incident has revealed systemic issues that extend far beyond the actions of any individual cadet or commander. What you are suggesting, General Morduan said carefully, is a fundamental restructuring of military education that has successfully trained officers for 2 centuries. What we are suggesting, Martinez replied, is an evolution of military education that recognizes the realities of an increasingly diverse galactic community. The methods that worked for a Gordanian-dominated force may not be optimal for integrated units representing dozens of species with different cultural values and physiological capabilities. The debate continued for several more hours as delegates explored various compromise positions. Some proposed modified training protocols that would accommodate different cultural sensitivities. Others suggested separate training tracks for different species groups. A few radical voices even proposed completely restructuring the Academy's command hierarchy to ensure better representation from all Federation members. Throughout these discussions, one question remained central. What would happen to Marcus Chun? As the formal session concluded, several private meetings began taking place. The Vorthack delegation approached the human representatives to discuss potential collaboration on training reform initiatives. The Zilani expressed interest in conducting detailed studies of human combat capabilities and tactical thinking. Even some of the smaller species representatives began exploring whether the incident might create opportunities to address their own concerns about military culture. General Morduan, however, remained adamant that the human cadet must face severe consequences. In a heated discussion with Admiral Kextar after the formal session, he made his position clear. If this human escapes meaningful punishment, it sets a precedent that will destroy military discipline throughout the galaxy, Morduin insisted. Every cadet will believe they can assault superior officers whenever they disagree with orders. With respect, General, Admiral Kextar replied. The situation is more complex than simple insubordination. The political ramifications of severe punishment could damage Federation unity, while the lack of appropriate response might indeed undermine military authority. We need a solution that addresses both concerns. Meanwhile, in his detention cell, Marcus remained largely unaware of the galactic political storm swirling around him. His daily routine consisted of basic meals, limited exercise periods, and occasional visit from Academy personnel conducting interviews about the incident. He had been informed that his case was receiving high-level attention, but the full scope of the diplomatic crisis remained unclear. What he did know was that his actions had created consequences far beyond anything he had anticipated. Captain Vasquez had visited twice more, each time providing updates on the political situation and reassuring him that the human colonial administration was working to ensure fair treatment. However, she had also warned him that the ultimate resolution might require compromises that no one would find completely satisfactory. The most significant development came on the third evening, when Admiral Kextar himself arrived for a private meeting. The Meridian Administrator's tentacles moved in patterns that Marcus had learned indicated serious contemplation. Cadet Chun, the Admiral began, I am here to inform you that your case has become a matter of galactic importance. Decisions made regarding your future will affect not only your personal career, but the relationship between species within the Federation and the future of integrated military training. Marcus absorbed this information soberly. Sir, I understand that my actions have created complications. I want you to know that I accept full responsibility for my decision to strike Commander Thalex. Your acceptance of responsibility is noted and appreciated, Admiral Kextar replied. However, the question before us is not simply one of individual accountability, but of institutional evolution. Your actions have forced us to confront fundamental questions about military culture, leadership development, and species integration that we have avoided addressing for too long. The Admiral paused, his alien features displaying what Marcus had learned to recognize as careful consideration. I'm going to share something with you that may influence your perspective on this situation, Admiral Kextar continued. This is not the first incident involving questionable disciplinary actions by Gordanian officers. However, it is the first time someone has directly challenged those actions and created sufficient political pressure to demand systematic review. Marcus felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. Does that mean my actions might lead to positive changes? It means, the Admiral replied carefully, that your actions have created an opportunity for positive changes. Whether that opportunity is realized will depend on the wisdom and compromise capabilities of beings far more powerful than either of us. As Admiral Kextar departed, Marcus was left to contemplate the enormous responsibility that had fallen upon him. He had thrown a single punch to protect a friend, and that simple act of human instinct had somehow become the catalyst for a galaxy-wide examination of military culture and leadership principles. The next morning would bring the announcement of a decision that would determine not only his fate, but the future direction of galactic military cooperation. The announcement came at dawn on the fourth day, delivered simultaneously to media outlets across the galaxy and Academy personnel through official channels. The compromise solution that had emerged from 3 days of intense negotiation would reshape military education and establish new precedents for interspecies cooperation within the Federation. Admiral Kextar stood before the assembled Academy staff, cadets, and media representatives in the main auditorium, his tentacles betraying none of the exhaustion he felt after the marathon diplomatic sessions. Beside him sat the emergency council that had hammered out the historic agreement, their diverse forms representing the unity that the Federation hoped to achieve. After extensive deliberation and consultation with Federation leadership, Admiral Kextar announced, "We have reached a resolution that addresses the immediate incident while establishing new protocols for military education and cross-species integration." The auditorium fell silent as beings from dozens of worlds waited to learn how the crisis would be resolved. Marcus sat in the front row between Captain Vasquez and a legal representative from the Human Colonial Administration, his stomach tight with anticipation. Regarding Cadet Marcus Chun, the Admiral continued, it has been determined that while his actions constituted a clear violation of military protocol, the circumstances that provoked those actions represented systemic failures in leadership and cultural sensitivity. Therefore, Cadet Chun will face formal disciplinary action, but will not be expelled from the academy. Relief flooded through Marcus, though he maintained his military bearing as the Admiral continued. Specifically, Cadet Chun will serve 30 days of restricted duty, during which time he will participate in intensive leadership development programs and cultural sensitivity training. Upon completion of this program, he will be restored to full cadet status and permitted to continue his education. A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. The punishment was far lighter than anyone had expected, given the unprecedented nature of the incident. However, Admiral Kextar was not finished. Commander Thalex will also face disciplinary action for violations of Academy regulations regarding the treatment of cadets. He will be suspended from teaching duties pending completion of comprehensive training in interspecies leadership and appropriate disciplinary methods. Upon successful completion of this program, he will be eligible for reassignment to duties more suited to his experience and capabilities. The implications of this decision were staggering. A senior Gordanian commander was being disciplined for actions that would have been considered routine under traditional military doctrine. General Mordoon's expression was thunderous, but he remained seated as Admiral Kextar outlined the broader changes. More significantly, the Admiral announced, the Academy will implement comprehensive reforms to our training methodologies. These reforms will establish new standards for military discipline that respect the cultural values and physiological differences of all Federation species while maintaining the effectiveness and unity essential to galactic defense. Professor Ziltera activated her translation device to add details about the specific changes. The Technical Union will lead development of new combat assessment protocols that account for species-specific capabilities. Initial studies suggest that optimal military units integrate diverse abilities rather than enforcing uniform standards. Commander Krellnan from the Vorthak Confederacy stood to address the assembly. The Confederacy will contribute expertise in leadership development methodologies that have proven effective across multiple species. We believe that effective military discipline emerges from respect and professional development rather than intimidation or physical correction. Ambassador Martinez rose to represent the human perspective. The Human Colonial Administration commits to sharing our species' knowledge of combat techniques, leadership principles, and protective instincts. We believe that human values of defending the vulnerable and challenging injustice can contribute positively to galactic military culture. The most dramatic moment came when General Mordoon himself stood to address the assembly. The massive Gordanian commander's presence commanded immediate attention, and his word would determine whether the compromise could actually succeed. The Gordanian Empire acknowledges that military excellence requires adaptation to changing circumstances, Mordoon announced, his translator rendering his reluctant words into Standard Galactic. While we maintain pride in our military traditions, we recognize that integrated forces require integrated approaches to leadership and discipline. He paused, his amber eyes scanning the assembly before focusing directly on Marcus. Cadet Chun, your actions were inappropriate and dangerous. However, your motivations were consistent with the protective instincts that make good soldiers. I hope you will learn to channel those instincts more appropriately in the future. Marcus stood and responded formally. Thank you, General. I hope to prove that humans can contribute positively to galactic military cooperation while respecting the chain of command and the wisdom of experienced officers. The formal proceedings concluded with the announcement of specific implementation timelines for the new training protocols. However, the real significance of the moment became apparent in the informal interactions that followed. Cadet Zix approached Marcus immediately after the assembly, his dark eyes bright with gratitude and excitement. Marcus, I want to thank you for what you did. Not just protecting me, but starting something that will protect other cadets in the future. I never intended to start anything, Marcus replied honestly. I just couldn't watch someone hurt you for doing the right thing. That's exactly why it worked, said a new voice. They turned to find Captain Elena Vasquez approaching with a slight smile. Marcus, your instinctive response reflected human values at their best. Sometimes the most important changes begin with simple acts of conscience. Over the following weeks, the Academy underwent transformation that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. The new training protocols emphasize collaboration between species rather than dominance hierarchies. Combat assessments began incorporating diverse tactical approaches that utilized each species' unique advantages. Most importantly, leadership development programs focused on earning respect through competence and character rather than maintaining authority through intimidation. Marcus found himself at the center of many of these changes. His 30 days of restricted duty became an intensive education in diplomacy, cultural sensitivity, and military leadership theory. Rather than punishment, it felt more like accelerated preparation for responsibilities he had never expected to carry. The most significant development came when Admiral Kextar offered him a unique opportunity. Cadet Chun, your actions have demonstrated leadership potential that extends beyond traditional military roles. I would like to offer you a position in our new interspecies integration program, working to develop training protocols that maximize the effectiveness of diverse military units. Marcus considered the offer carefully. Sir, I appreciate the opportunity, but I came to the Academy to serve as a line officer, not as an administrator. Who says you cannot do both? The Admiral replied with what might have been amusement. The galaxy needs officers who understand how to lead integrated units in combat situations. Your combination of tactical instincts and cross-species sensitivity makes you an ideal candidate for such roles. The Admiral's prediction proved accurate. As Marcus progressed through his training, he found himself naturally gravitating toward leadership positions in mixed-species units. His human protective instincts, combined with his growing understanding of alien cultures and capabilities, made him exceptionally effective at creating cohesive teams from diverse beings. 6 months after the incident, Marcus led Squad 7 through their final combat assessment. The team had evolved dramatically from their first awkward attempts at cooperation. Zix had developed into a brilliant reconnaissance specialist, while the Vorthack members had learned to coordinate their heavy weapons with the Meridian Scout's mobility. The Zalani technician had created innovative equipment modifications that enhanced everyone's capabilities. The assessment itself was a complex, multi-phase operation that would have challenged veteran units. Squad 7's performance was flawless, with each member contributing their unique strengths to achieve objectives that would have been impossible for any single species to accomplish alone. Commander Thale X, who had returned to duty after completing his retraining program, observed the exercise from the command center. His attitude toward Marcus had evolved considerably over the intervening months. While they would never be friends, they had developed a professional respect based on mutual recognition of each other's capabilities and commitment to military excellence. Impressive coordination, Thale X noted as the exercise concluded. Your squad has achieved integration levels that exceed most veteran units. Thank you, sir, Marcus replied formally. I believe our success demonstrates the effectiveness of the new training methodologies. Thale X studied him for a moment before nodding. Indeed it does, Cadet Shun. Indeed it does. The Academy's transformation had ripple effects throughout the galactic military. Other training installations began implementing similar integration protocols. Mixed-species units reported improved performance and morale. Most significantly, the philosophical changes in military culture began attracting recruits from species that had previously been reluctant to participate in Federation defense forces. The incident that had begun with a single punch to defend a friend had evolved into a fundamental shift in how the galaxy approached military cooperation and leadership development. Human values of protecting the vulnerable and challenging injustice have found their place alongside alien traditions of honor, duty, and tactical excellence. As Marcus prepared for graduation and his first assignment as a junior officer, he reflected on the chain of events that had brought him to this point. He had come to the Academy hoping to prove that humans could contribute to galactic security. Instead, he had helped prove that the galaxy's greatest strength lay not in the dominance of any single species, but in the integration of diverse perspectives and capabilities. The final ceremony took place in the same auditorium where Admiral Kextar had announced the historic compromise. Marcus stood with his graduating class, representing dozens of species from across known space. His human uniform bore the insignia of an officer in the Galactic Defense Force, but more importantly, it bore the respect of beings who had learned to see past species differences to recognize character and capability. Admiral Kextar approached Marcus after the ceremony, his tentacles moving in patterns that conveyed deep satisfaction. Cadet Chun, or rather, Lieutenant Chun, your actions 6 months ago changed more than disciplinary policies. They changed how we think about leadership, about justice, and about the strength that comes from diversity. Thank you, sir, Marcus replied. I hope I can continue to live up to the opportunities that have been created. I have no doubt you will, the Admiral assured him. The galaxy is fortunate to have humans like you serving in its defense forces. As Marcus left the Academy for his first assignment aboard the exploration vessel Harmony's Edge, he carried with him the knowledge that a single moment of human instinct had helped reshape galactic civilization. The punch that had knocked out Commander Thalex had also knocked down barriers between species, creating new possibilities for cooperation and understanding. The ship that would be his new home was itself a symbol of the changes that had taken place. Its crew included beings from 17 different worlds, working together under command structures that emphasized mutual respect and collaborative leadership. The human values that Marcus had defended with his fists were now integrated into the very fabric of galactic military culture. As Harmony's Edge departed for the Outer Rim territories, its mission was both exploration and protection, seeking new worlds and new allies while defending the principles of justice and cooperation that had become the Foundation's greatest strength. Marcus stood on the bridge beside his fellow officers, watching the stars wheel by, knowing that humanity had found its place in the galaxy not through conquest or dominance, but through the simple courage to stand up for what was right. The young man who had once thrown a punch to defend a friend had become a symbol of what humans could contribute to galactic civilization. Unwavering principles, protective instincts, and the courage to challenge injustice wherever it was found. In the vast expanse of space ahead, those qualities would be tested again and again, but Marcus was confident that humanity and their alien allies would face those challenges together, united by values that transcended species differences and reach toward the stars themselves.